This story was brought to you by Black Verdict. Subscribe, like, and share. Elias Vance did not become famous. There were no headlines, no movies. Eventually, his sentence was reduced. Partly due to procedural errors, he uncovered himself. When he left prison, he didn't walk out angry. He walked out informed. Some guards shook his hand. Others avoided eye contact. But none forgot him. Today, his story circulates quietly. Among inmates, among advocates, among officers who understand now that authority is strongest when paired with knowledge. Because inside those walls, something extraordinary happened. A prison cell became a classroom. A prisoner became a teacher. And justice, however briefly, found a new voice. So ask yourself this. If knowledge can turn incarceration into education, if intellect can shift power without violence, then where does freedom truly begin? As Elias's legal confidence grew, so did the implications of his work. He began noticing patterns, procedural shortcuts, rights violations hidden behind routine, not malicious, but dangerous. He filed challenges carefully, strategically, not too many, not too loud, each one precise. Some were dismissed, others weren't. A disciplinary ruling overturned, a policy revised, a training memo quietly circulated. No announcements, no credit given. But change happened. The institution adapted, not because it wanted to, but because it had to. The law had entered the building in a way it never had before, and it came from a cell. Something subtle happened next. The power dynamic shifted, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Guards began stopping by Elias's cell during quiet shifts. They asked about procedures, clarifications, gray areas in prison policy. Some were defensive, others curious. A few were genuinely unsettled by how little training they'd received. Elias never lectured. He explained. He quoted statutes. He referenced case law. He pointed to written policy. And when he didn't know something, he said so. That honesty built trust. Soon, conversations turned deeper. Why certain rules existed. Why others were legally questionable. Why lawsuits happened. For the first time, guards weren't just enforcing rules. They were understanding them. And that changed how they acted. Not all of them. Not overnight. But enough to matter. Some began correcting colleagues. Others adjusted behavior quietly. Elias remained an inmate. Still locked in. Still powerless in most ways. But intellectually, he had become something else. A resource. A mirror. A reminder that authority without understanding is fragile. It started quietly. One inmate asked Elias for help filing a grievance. Another needed assistance understanding an appeal deadline. Elias didn't promise miracles. He promised accuracy. He explained timelines. Formatting. Legal terminology. Slowly, something changed. Paperwork that once came back rejected started moving forward. Not winning, but being heard. That mattered. Word spread. Elias became known as someone who understood the system. Not emotionally, not angrily, but precisely. He didn't argue. He cited. And that caught attention. A corrections officer noticed something unusual. A motion written by an inmate that followed procedure perfectly. No islang, no mistakes, no emotional language. Just law. Another guard noticed too. Then a supervisor. They didn't like it at first, but they couldn't ignore it. Because when Elias referenced policy, he was right. And when staff tried to correct him, they sometimes couldn't. That was uncomfortable. Prison runs on hierarchy, certainty, authority. But the law doesn't care about rank. It only cares about accuracy. Soon, guards began asking questions. Quietly, not officially, not openly. What does this policy actually say? Can we do this? What happens if an inmate files this correctly? At first, Elias answered cautiously. He knew the danger of appearing too confident. But he also knew the law didn't belong to anyone. And knowledge, once learned, demands to be shared. Elias Vance never planned to become a legal scholar. Before prison, he lived an ordinary life. Not perfect, not extraordinary, but stable. His arrest came suddenly. A case built quickly. Evidence that felt incomplete. Deadlines rushed. Questions unanswered. A public defender juggling too many cases. In too little time, Elias noticed things early. Inconsistencies in reports. Procedures skipped. Statements that didn't align. But in court, none of that seemed to matter. The system moved forward, with or without the truth. When the sentence came down, Elias felt something deeper than anger. He felt erased. Inside prison, that feeling intensified. Rules governed everything. When to eat, when to sleep, when to speak. Yet no one explained those rules clearly. Men were punished without knowing why. Grievances disappeared. Appeals were rejected over technicalities no one understood. Elias watched inmates fail not because they were wrong, but because they didn't know the language of the law. That's when the spark ignited. If the system spoke law, then law was the only way to fight back. The prison library was small. Outdated books. Missing volumes. But Elias read everything he could find. Legal dictionaries. Old case summaries. Prison policy manuals that most inmates ignored. At night under dim lights, he copied notes by hand. Other inmates laughed at first. Man, that won't help you. The courts don't listen. You're wasting time. Some guards noticed too. They dismissed him as bored or desperate. But Elias kept reading. Not because he believed it would save him, but because understanding the rules was the only way to survive with dignity. Imagine being locked inside a concrete cell. Steel bars, cameras overhead, keys that never belonged to you. Now imagine this. Instead of counting down the days, you're studying legal codes, case law, procedural rules, and one day, the very people guarding you come to you for answers. How does an inmate become a teacher? How does a prisoner turn into a legal authority? And what happens when knowledge shifts the balance of power? Inside one of the most rigid systems in society, you think you know prison stories, escapes, violence, survival. But this story is different because this man didn't escape prison. He transformed it. Inside these walls, power usually comes from uniforms and keys. But what happens when the most powerful knowledge comes from the least powerful person? This is the astonishing account of an inmate who defied every expectation, not by running, not by fighting, but by learning. This is the story of Elias Vance, the inmate who taught law to guards from inside prison. Subscribe to Black Verdict for more true crime documentary stories rooted in real pain, real systems, and real power.